Hello, everyone. This is Brianna Miko.
Hope all is well. I'm Ava Adams.
And I'm Tessa Stevens, and thanks for joining us.
We're here for connecting and supporting people,
sharing relatable moments,
always encouraging and always growing. We're
practically
social work. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Practically Social Work. Today, we have our first guest. Our guest is Mikayla. We're excited to have you, Mikayla. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking a little bit about Mikayla's story and her background with substance abuse and where she is now. Mikayla, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Mikayla. I am 23. I just had a birthday. I'm completely abstinent. I don't partake in anything. That's not the way sobriety works for everyone. That's just how it works for me in my personal life. I am currently going to school and I live in Buffalo and I'm from Chautauqua Lake. I came out here to start my recovery journey and just decided that the recovery climate out here was way more than it was in my small town. So,
all right.
Good for you.
Congrats. Mikayla, how long have you been sober?
I got clean July 26, 2019. So on the 26th of January, I celebrated 3.5 years clean and sober. I should have looked at how many days. I know it's like 15,000 days or something like that.
A lot of people do actually count down the number of days. And I think that's like such a good motivator. I love that.
Heck yeah. Every single day is hard, bro. Every day.
So not 15,000, 1,293 days. I used to count. And then after I hit 1,000, it was just like, it was a lot of days. But my goal was 1,000. I know people that have like 8,000, 10,000, and they have like apps to track it.
And that will be you.
Yes, manifesting.
It's been over 3 years since you've been clean. Congratulations. It's quite a feat. It is not an easy thing. You must be so strong. I'd like to ask you, how long exactly were you active in your addiction?
I started experimenting with drugs when I was 12. I have a lot of familial addiction. My uncles were addicted to heroin. That was when the opiate epidemic really started. My uncle got prescribed it. He got addicted to it, introduced his brothers to it, and then they became addicted. The prescriptions ran out. They got addicted to heroin. And then my dad suffers from alcoholism, and generations going back, like 5 generations that I could trace, have suffered from alcoholism on my dad's side. I always grew up around addiction. It was very normalized and mental health wasn't talked about. Anytime I was struggling, I just put in the back of my head, like when dad's mad, he drinks, or like when I see my uncle upset because he can't see his daughter, like he gets high. That was always my coping mechanism that I knew I could go to that was safe, because my family, we weren't like a talking family. My dad was physically and verbally abusive because of the substance use. I started experimenting when I was 12 with alcohol and marijuana. And then when I was 13, I was groomed by an older man who took advantage of me and took me like under his wing, per se. He manipulated me, saw me as a vulnerable young girl who just wanted validation and love. And he sought that out from me. And I thought that he cared about me and loved me. And he introduced me to methamphetamine. And I was hooked by 14. And it had completely destroyed my life by the time I was 14. Then I continued using meth all the way up until I got clean when I was 19. But when I was 17, I got introduced to heroin by another boyfriend that I ended up dating who was a drug dealer. And I had ran out of meth, and the only thing that there was to use was heroin. So I tried it. I was instantly addicted. That took my life way faster downhill than meth ever did. I'm very grateful in a way that I got addicted to heroin, because I don't think if I hadn't of, I would have ever gotten clean. I know people that do meth for 40 and 50 years that never hit their bottom. But heroin took everything from me. I started shooting up at 17, and you lose a lot when you are shooting up, especially just your self-worth, all of that stuff. So I continued spiraling and using until I was 19, and I was overdosing almost on a weekly basis, and I just had enough. So that's like 6 years 6 years of like heavy abuse. And obviously that was the most important time for my brain growth and everything. So I missed out on a lot of milestones because of my addiction.
Wow.
Thank you
for
for
sharing.
thank you for being so vulnerable. My next question was actually leading into a lot of what you said. So it made a light bulb go off. Some of these facts about methamphetamine use and heroin use that has to do with adolescence. And I figured it'd be a good time to share that. Your story is unique, but as a whole of society, the initiation of methamphetamine use among people aged 12 or older in the year 2021, 101,000 people initiated meth use in the past year. Approximately 50% of the people who used methamphetamine for the first time in the past year were under the age of 25.
Wow.
And the age group were 24,000 adolescent aged from 12 to 17.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a really big reason, and we'll get into it later, but that's a really big reason why my focus is adolescents. Addiction is wiping out their generation faster than we've seen it wipe out any other generation before them. It's terrifying, and it's something that people don't realize, because when you're a teenager, especially when, in my experience, it was, she's just a girl, she'll get over it, growing pains. It was very normalized. My abuse was normalized, my drug abuse, the toxic relationship that I was in, the toxic environment that I was in. So I never felt validated in my struggle. And I always just felt like it was because of where I was, because I'm from a really small town. That's all there is. So that's what everybody accepts to be what their life is going to be. And you either sink or swim when you are living in that environment. When I talk about my hometown, it's old people and addicts. Like, that's all it is when you think of out there. I'm from close to Jamestown, so I know people that know of the area. The pipeline for drug abuse and sex trafficking and everything out there is so bad because there just isn't help. It's not normalized.
That's so sad. It really is. Onset of youth, and then especially in conjunction with like mental health.
It's disturbing.
It is. It's mind-boggling. Among 3.7 million adolescents from 12 to 17 in the year 2021, 44.2% received treatment for depression. That's almost half of adolescents. It's not surprising why drug use is so common.
Yeah, for me, coming from like a recovering addict who suffered during those years, those numbers aren't weird to me, because the people that I surrounded myself with were my age abusing drugs. And I know it's gotten a lot worse, but I just, it's so normal in my head that I'm like, yeah.
And not to cut you off, I think another important thing is, like, for Ava, myself, and Brianne, we have years on you, even in that short amount of time, in the time that we were adolescents, in the time that you were adolescents, the amount of use has skyrocketed. It climbed.
Not only the numbers changing, but like you said, it's normalized. Addiction is normalized. Ignoring mental health is normalized.
Yeah. Before Brianne asks her next question, I figured I'd just bring this up because this is something that happened in a small town where I'm from today. There was an incident at the high school where somebody took a drink and had to be immediately rushed to the hospital because the drink was spiked. So normalized. It's just mind-boggling that this
is actually happening.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's just going to keep getting worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
We got to educate.
I know you talked a little bit about you were overdosing weekly, and that's when you decided to stop. And I was just wondering, did you have like a moment of clarity? Like, what was your aha moment? When was enough, and that made you decide to stop?
Yeah. So 3.5 years later, talking about this still makes me cry. I was not normally somebody that used alone, but at the end of my addiction, I got so desperate that I just didn't want to be alive anymore. I was homeless. I was prostituting myself out. I was in a very, very tumultuous relationship with an extremely abusive, narcissistic man. He would pistol whip me, beat me, anything you can think of. Like, I went through it with him. And this day, I solely used the amount of fentanyl that I did because I wanted to take my life. And I used at my parents' house, and my parents were not home, or I did not know that they were home. And my dad found me. At that time, my dad did not know that I was addicted to fentanyl. My mom had no idea that I was addicted to heroin. And I say heroin and fentanyl because back then there was still some heroin on the street. Now there's little to no heroin on the street, but I was using some at the time, but they found me. And thankfully I live right next to, or my parents live right next to the fire hall. So they were able to call 911. They had Narcan from when my uncle was alive, and it was expired, but any Narcan is good Narcan. It doesn't matter if it's expired. My mom knew how to use it. They had to Narcan me 4 times. And when I woke up, I was aggravated. I was upset, and I had swung on my dad. And at that moment, I knew that my actions were no longer only affecting me. My little brother was there. He was 17. And I had to put him through seeing his big sister dying in front of him. That was never my intention. But when I tried to take my life, I was doing it in my family home. Obviously, they were going to find me. So I looked at my mom and I just said, I can't do this anymore. You need to take me to treatment, or I'm going to change my mind and you're never going to see me again. You need to take me now. So my mom packed up as much as she could, and we called the doctor. The doctor got me in immediately, and I got taken. When I got there, I changed my mind. I was mad. I got high before we left because I didn't want to be going through withdrawals. And the only reason that I stayed was because I told them that I was going to kill myself, and they had to put me on a mandatory hold. If not, I would not have gotten sober. So because of that 72-hour mandatory hold and me being able to get that clarity and that medical detox that I needed, I was able to fight the urges to go back out and continue using. But my moment was realizing, like, this isn't about me anymore. This isn't just about me. When you're not around people, it's so easy to compartmentalize that hurt and that pain that you're causing them and not think about it. But when you see what you're doing to the people that you claim to love or that love you, it's so hard. And I know bottoms are different for everyone, but thing that had to do with my family was always something that led me to want to get sober. My sister got pregnant. I tried my hardest to be in my nephew's life and get sober for him, and that just wasn't my time. And then while I was trying to get sober this last time, which I ended up doing, my sister ended up getting pregnant with my niece. And that was my huge motivation during rehab, because my uncle lost his life to addiction, and I didn't want them to have to know who I was through stories. And that's how I learned who my uncle was. My motivation was family, and like not having to be like, this is who your Aunt Mikayla was. Or I remember my sister Mikayla, like she was so awesome, or she was so kind. Like I didn't want to do that to them. That moment saved and changed my life. And I honestly haven't really thought about wanting to go back to that lifestyle ever since then. Long explanation, but yeah.
No, it's a good explanation. And we all appreciate it, because you're kind of giving us the real insight scoop on what it looks like, the reality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely appreciate it. You told us how you're doing it. You found the strength because it's not about you anymore, and that empowered you to fight the battle. My question is, exactly how do you fight that battle? Like what in treatment is like that magical cure that's making you not use anymore? What is it that you're doing? What is it that treatment is helping you do? What is it?
So really, I think treatment does wonders. I think treatment's great. It gave me the tools that I need to succeed and be a productive member of society. But the only way an addict is ever going to get sober, stay sober, and live a good life is if they want it. That is the main thing that I learned in any treatment facility that I was at. Was I saw people that took the information, knew the information, like could recite the entire NA book like it was the Bible, and still kept going back out and still kept using. And it's because they hadn't had their critical moment yet. Like they just didn't want recovery more than they wanted that lifestyle. So for me, treatment was about teaching me, somebody that grew up in addiction, in those habits and in those behaviors, like breaking down those bad behaviors and teaching me like what normal teenagers learned, like how to behave in a normal way. Because my onset age of use was 13. So when I got clean at 19, my mental capacity was that of a 13-year-old. I was very immature, and I'm nowhere near where I should be at 23 years old. People tell me I'm mature for my age. Emotionally, no, I still have a very long way to go because of the stunt that it did on my brain's growth. A lot of it was just having to learn like things that I didn't get to learn and then applying it. Most of it has literally just been like, I just don't want that for myself anymore. I can't vision myself having to do the things that I did and having to compromise myself in those ways. I never had to live like that. And I never realized that that didn't have to be my life. I didn't have to continue using. There were resources that I could have used. I just felt so alone and so scared to ask for help because I was so scared to fail. Failure is such a big word that is used, especially if people have slips or reoccurrences. You don't lose any of the stuff that you learned. Like you don't lose any of that time. I had to rewire my brain to not think that anything that I was doing was inherently bad because I was an addict or inherently wrong, or that I was an inherently bad person, and just keep reminding myself why I'm doing this and why I want this. That's really been my mantra is, what's your motivation?
Right. So what do you do when life brings you into situations in the past that would have caused you to use? What are some coping skills, or how do you deal with that?
So my biggest thing since I've gotten clean and my hardest thing has been boundaries. And I know a lot of people that aren't in recovery struggle with boundaries.
Right.
You know, my dad is an alcoholic. So this is an example I'll use. Bills games, big drinking things. You know, we're a football town with a drinking problem. It's a big thing out here. I know, and I learned very early on in my recovery, I cannot expect the people in my life to change their behaviors because I'm in recovery or because I want them to. I went through treatment. They did not. My parents are still exactly where they were 3.5 years ago. And I've progressed and I've moved on because I've been given the tools. So I have to know that if I have to remove myself from this situation, it's because of their choices. It's not because of what I'm doing wrong. So I've had to learn, like, I can't be for everybody. I can't be around everybody. I'm a people pleaser. So I've had to really learn how to say no and not let people walk all over me. And also implement self-care in any way possible, any time possible that I can, because it's really easy to not take care of yourself, especially with somebody like me. My biggest thing, I was really bad into self-harm before my addiction got really bad. That is something else that I'm recovering from. I like painting. I like to paint and I like to go for walks. And like, I got a cat as an ESA and I like journaling, just things to keep my mind out of like the moment. And when I think about wanting to use, which is like very rarely, but when I do, it's serious. When I do, it's really something's happening. And I have to do like a self check-in with myself and ask myself why I'm having those feelings, and then play the tape all the way through. Where is this going to get you? Well, your meth is probably going to be laced. Your fentanyl is going to be fentanyl. You have no tolerance and you're going to OD. And you're going to be shameful if you'll use by yourself, and nobody will be there to administer Narcan if you make it that far. So, you know, that's the biggest thing, is like thinking about everything. But a lot of the times, because my brain is wired to want to use, that's just what I think I'm supposed to do when I'm struggling, is like, you're struggling, you deserve to get high. And I have to rewire my brain to be like, is that going to help? Is that really going to do anything for you? Or is it just going to make everything worse?
So self-coaching. You do a lot of self-coaching.
Yeah, I like that term.
Yeah. That's actually really cool. It means that you are self-aware and not every one of us is. So that's a real strength that you have.
I agree. Mikayla, I know you said that developmentally, like emotionally, you aren't where you should be, but I see a lot of strengths in you.
Thank
I
you.
see so many, honestly. You're in the program that we're in. For people to have that type of background and then go into social work, I think it provides so much more empathy for the people that you're working with. So I feel like you are in such a good place in your life now, and you're probably a lot stronger than you think you are.
I get told that a lot, actually.
The humility, it's the humility for me.
Yeah, that's the main principles actually that we learn about in narcotics anonymous. So
Yeah.
at least I know that I'm doing that right.
Kayla, I know you kind of talked a little bit about where your sobriety is and how you're maintaining your recovery, but I wanted to talk to you about where do you really stand in your journey right now? Tell me just a little bit about where you feel like you stand as a person.
So I think my recovery is probably honestly the strongest that it's ever been. A little bit before the summer, I had a really bad thing happen at the past job that I was at. And I just spiraled and like went downhill and stopped taking care of my mental health. A big part of recovery is mental health. So I stopped taking my medications. I was going into different manic episodes and like just not maintaining very well. And that sprung me into what I would say was probably the closest I've ever been to a relapse. And it was right after I celebrated 3 years clean. When I got to the point where I almost used, I got a hold of an old drug dealer and was going to drive all the way out to go pick it up. That's how close I got. That was the closest I'd ever gotten to using. I invigorated my program. And ever since then, I've been 110% into my recovery. I go to NA meetings at least once a week. That's Narcotics Anonymous for anybody that's listening that doesn't know. It's a 12-step program. It's spiritual, not religious. A lot of people group it in with religion, but they use like God language, but I don't partake in the God portion. You get to pick your own creation you want to believe in. Some people choose God, some people choose Mother Nature. Mine's personally somebody that was very close to me that I lost in my addiction. After I got sober, it was one of the girls that I used to live with. So she become like my motivation and someone that I look to for signs when I'm struggling. I know some people don't believe in that kind of stuff, but that's really what helped me connect in my recovery was like my spirituality. So I got into Reiki and like just a bunch of different things and have been exploring with like crystals and stuff. And I know how people feel about crystal girls, but what works for one person isn't what's going to work for everybody else.
If it makes you happy, that's what matters.
Really find who I am. I think for a long time in my recovery, I identified how I thought I should identify. And during that time, I like found out some more things about like my sexuality and like who I am like as a person. And I haven't tried to fit into this mold that I thought I needed to when I came into recovery, because treatment centers are very one way. They teach you one way and they teach you that that is the way. And they tell you you can do what you want, but really they're giving you this paperwork. You do this paperwork, you do these groups. That's what your life is. So that's what you think your recovery needs to be. But that a lot of people say like a relapse or something close to a relapse, or the language has changed. It's supposed to be reoccurrence, but is something that makes you re-implement your program even stronger. And I wholeheartedly believe that. Like I almost lost everything that I've been working for. So now I am so much more in tune with like my body and myself and like what my triggers are. And I was not going to therapy. I started going back to therapy. I finally decided that I was ready to do trauma therapy. In the beginning of my recovery, I tried it and I just wasn't ready. But I went through a lot of trauma. Obviously, when I was out using, I went through a lot of horrible things. When I was younger, I went through a lot of tragic things that no child should ever have to go through. So trauma therapy has been something that has really released a lot of that on my body. Like I just feel lighter and I feel like I don't have to carry this 100 million pound rock on my back all the time. And I just have been able to focus more on me and not stress about like the little things, and really make recovery my number one thing. Because when you're an addict and you get clean, recovery has to be number one, or else nothing else will work.
Okay.
It's a lot of valuable information that sharing about what that recovery process can look like and how it can be so different for everybody. And I really appreciate you giving the insight on what worked for you.
Sometimes it's hard to talk about, but people can get really judgmental when you start talking about the crystal stuff or like spirituality and other things like that. So sometimes it's hard for me to talk about, because people ask, but do they really want to know, or do they want to like tell me what they think that I should do? But obviously you guys really want to know.
I mean, full disclosure, I've been dealing with mental health stuff my whole life, and I don't think essential oils cure mental health, but they make me happy. Certain smells just trigger happiness for me. They just do. And, I think people get shit on a lot for what works for them. I'm one of those people that does like part holistic, part Western medicine, because not everybody's journey is the same. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
So what's it like now that you're on the other side? Like, how do you feel when you see somebody walking in when, their life is a mess, they're at rock bottom and disheveled and wanting to use? Like, how does that land on you? Does it trigger you? What does it feel like?
I think as somebody in the field who has experience working as an addictions counselor, the hardest thing and the hardest pill for me to swallow is that I know that most of them are not going to be successful. And it's so hard watching people constantly cycle through and really, really want it, but just not be able to grasp recovery. And for me, not understand why people don't get the same opportunity that I've gotten. Like, why not everyone deserves to get clean. This is something that for me, I get emotional over a lot of things. This is something that it's really hard to watch. Over the past 3 years, I've lost like over 50 friends to addiction. My best friend, we just had to bury 6 months ago. She had a baby. She deserved to be alive. She deserved recovery. So the hardest thing is I have survivor's guilt almost. Is like, why me? Why can't I save these people? What am I not doing right to be able to get them to see their worth? And I haven't been able to learn, like, you can't save them. And that's why I had to leave my last job, because it was taking so much out of me watching these women just not grasp what I was trying to teach them and not having it not be my fault.
What a burden.
It's hard. And I think a lot of people that are in your shoes have very similar feelings, that survivor's guilt, because it could have been them and now it's their loved ones. And why I think what happens is a lot of people have that feeling of, why am I living through this when they could be living with me?
Yeah, and that's why I do what I do, so that I can at least feel like I've used this gift that I've been given to, if I can reach one person by the time that I die, like that, I already know that I've done what my purpose is on this earth. And I actually got reached out to by somebody that I haven't talked to since high school. And he told me that he's been watching my journey since I got clean. And it made him realize that he needed to get help. And that solidified, I rode on that high for the rest of the week. Because when you think people aren't seeing you, there's somebody watching. And at that moment, I realized, like, okay, I this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is it.
I have a question for you, and I don't know if this is even an accurate question to ask you, but I feel like I recall you stating at some point or another that you're actually residing in like a sober living type of situation. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I live in supportive housing, so it's like low income housing. It's for homeless or on the verge of becoming homeless. But most of the people that are here, I think actually all of the people that are here are in recovery. So when I first moved in here, I was getting it paid for me because I wasn't working. I was mandated to go to the groups that they offered here. I have a caseworker, there's a harm reduction worker here, and then they're trying to get you back on your feet, get you in the workforce, get you in school, whatever success is going to look like for you. I'm about to actually phase out of here and move out onto my own into like my own place
Right.
May. So
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Do you think you're going to miss it?
no,
Okay.
no, hate it here. It served its purpose. I hate saying I hate it here because I'm grateful for the opportunity. Obviously, not everybody is afforded this opportunity, but I'm not going to miss random drug tests. When you're doing the right thing, it just gets annoying having to go and meet with them and do monthly goals and feeling like big brother's constantly watching me. I just want to be able to do the right thing and not feel like I'm being watched and made sure I'm doing the right thing. And that obviously the biggest test will be when I'm out of here, but I still have a caseworker that I'll be seeing and still be going to treatment and all that. None of that's going to stop just because I leave.
I think the biggest parts about recovery is always keeping some sort of support, and because recovery never ends.
Mm-hmm.
But I am so proud of you. I am so excited for when you get that new apartment and things are like less invasive in your life and you have some time in your life again.
Yeah, I'm so excited. They can just walk in here whenever they want. And
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I work in one of those settings, so I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get it from your perspective, but I'm the staff that walk randomly in.
Yeah. And being a staff, like invading someone's space, like you don't feel great doing that. Like,
No.
like that when I had to do room searches when I was a counselor, like I hated feeling like I was invading because even now, like this doesn't feel like home to me.
It's like people's boundaries that they have for themselves are immediately broken, but at the same time, it's what they sign up for. So it's like as a social worker, everything you learn ethically, it's like you're crossing boundaries, but at the same time, it is part of treatment and what they have signed up for. It's a strange situation altogether.
And after 3.5 years, I'll finally feel like I have a home. I'm not going to feel like a transient. It'll be solidified that that is my place. Because now, even though this is mine, it doesn't feel like it yet.
I wanted to just ask, what advice do you have for someone that's struggling?
I think my biggest takeaway from my time struggling is that closed mouths don't get in. If you are struggling, there are resources at the click of a button. I know for me out here where I am, we have 211 Western New York. That has been a big resource that I've sent so many people to that has homeless references, that it can give you domestic violence things, like anything that you can imagine the internet has at your fingertips. And the biggest thing is like the stigma of asking for help. But if you don't ask, you never know how different your life could be without it.
Yeah, absolutely.
211 it goes for Oswego County area too. That's something that we use here religiously. If you're in the upstate New York area, like upstate, that's a great resource for anybody listening.
I didn't know how far it went, so that's awesome that it goes all the way up there.
I think it's like Jefferson County, Oswego, Onondaga.
So Mikayla, girl.
Yes.
Let's say I am a person who's struggling with addiction, substance abuse addiction, and I'm in the thralls of it, and I'm not ready to maybe go to treatment. What do you say to somebody like that? How do you support an individual like me?
So obviously, like the gold standard is like sobriety, right? And to not use. But I'm a big pusher of harm reduction. So if you are going to use, I'm sure people have seen the billboards, never use alone. Always make sure you have somebody trade off. You use, your person, make sure that you're okay. They use. Make sure that you have Narcan. Make sure you know how to use Narcan. There are numbers that you can text to get Narcan delivered to you. If not, wherever you live, there is places that have it available and readily available. Make sure if you're using needles that you understand like HIV, all of those different transmittable diseases, that you're doing safe drop off and pick up places because they have safe safe places for you to get syringes now. Make sure that you have fentanyl test strips and that you're using them. All of those things are so important because, I'm not good at numbers, but let's just say like 50% of addicts will at one point in their life want to get clean. Harm reduction helps them hopefully stay alive long enough to get to that critical point where they want recovery. And if you're going to use, the most important thing is that you do it safely, because using in itself isn't safe. So if you can take just those little ways of caring for yourself while you are using, that might get you ready for the big step of stopping. Even if you're like slowly cutting down your use, like you do 10 bags a day and you start to do 9. And then after a while you taper to 8. And eventually, you cut down to 0. Or if you can't get to complete abstinence, that's okay too. Not complete abstinence doesn't work for everyone. It's just whatever works for you to keep you alive. Like your family wants you alive, your friends want you alive, and it's worth giving it a shot.
I love that you brought up harm reduction, because I feel like that's also something that gets shit on a lot. And I feel like when people put down that idea, like they're like, oh, using safely, there is no using safely. It's like it puts those people into a place of shame where there's less conversation about it. There's more hiding.
Yeah.
I think it's just so important to have that education around harm reduction, because it is so important. Because you're right, it gives that people that time to hopefully get to the point where they want to actually go into recovery.
When people say stuff against harm reduction, I say, all right, pick a member of your family to die. Pick one. Because most family members suffer from addiction. Who's not worth saving? Who's not giving a shot?
Sheesh.
It's hard, but it's true. Like
I love it though, because it's
who's not worth saving. Like you wouldn't tell a diabetic you can't have your insulin or you can't have these treatments. It's a disease. And we're learning more and more what interventions we can use to save these human beings' lives.
Yeah.
Because without harm reduction, I wouldn't be here in this interview right now. Narcan is the reason that I'm breathing.
I'm Narcan certified. I took a course, and yeah, it was very informative. And I think that every social worker, no matter what field that they are in, should be Narcan certified, honestly. Yeah.
And usually any agency in your local area will do free trainings and supply you with free Narcan once you're certified. I have 2. I keep one in my house because you never know if a friend's going to call you and not somebody else, even though I'd be calling 911 right away, because they're going to get their health off faster than me.
I'm a certified trainer, so I can train people on how to use it.
Nice. Would we be able to set up a class maybe if our listeners wanted to sign up? Could you?
Yeah.
That would be awesome. I know a lot of, our classmates are probably going to be interested in that as well. That would be amazing.
Yeah. I would love to do that.
Probably help set up for you if that's something of interest. I bet our professors will love that.
Yeah, let's set it up
too.
Yeah, it's so worth it to have the knowledge.
Absolutely.
So I got one last question, and I think this is the last question we probably have for you, unless somebody has something sporadic. But I know for you, you said when that defining moment, when you want to get treatment, you were able to get it instantly. But in your experience, have you noticed there's barriers for other people in getting the services they need? Do you know of any, or have you had friends with experience that like they were ready, but there was barriers or anything?
Yeah, I know a lot of people that have lost their lives because of the wait lists. There aren't beds open. I know from working in the profession that when there aren't enough staff, we will not house people. And because the turnover rate is so high, they're not going to put more people in a house because there's got to be a certain ratio. For example, I'm from Jamestown. There's one rehab there, and it's a 28-day. In the whole city, of Jamestown. And the other closest rehab that was a 28-day was Stutzman's, and it sadly shut down right after I was there. So it's the access that people don't have in rural areas to treatment. And if they do, they have to come to big cities, and they come to big cities and they're automatically targeted because they're vulnerable and in early recovery, and people prey on that. So that's huge for people in recovery, is like access to fair treatment. And a lot of times out here, I've seen like representation is not there. There's a lot of white clinicians, a lot of white counselors, and I can't speak from having a Black experience or a BIPOC community experience. So a lot of the girls didn't want to talk to me, rightfully so. I'm in recovery, but I will never understand what it feels like to live through their lens. So there needs to be more diversity hired, because it's out there. It's just not being hired. So that's another huge hurdle that I've seen, is that people don't want to come to treatment because there aren't staff that look like them. And that's horrible, because the rate of Black people that are dying to addiction is so disproportionately higher in certain areas than it is to white people because of the treatment opportunities.
Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't think that's even just substance abuse. I think that's across the board in many different areas, like whether it's healthcare, mental health, all of it. I feel that's a common theme.
And to take it a step further, I was going to say immigration status. Like if you're a non-documented person here in the States and you go to a rehab facility, you might just get picked up from ICE. It's wild out there.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that part either.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can speak about it and say that I want change, but I'm white. Like, what change am I going to bring aside from the fact that I can try to advocate for that change? But I'm not in a position of being a supervisor to hire those people. So it's like, when I was in treatment, that's what I saw. When I was a counselor, that's what I saw. And it really upset me, because everybody deserves the equal opportunity to get well.
Yeah. I love that you're sharing this, and hopefully that this platform will amplify your voice. And I hope that you can continue to educate people. This is real important stuff.
That's my dream. To hopefully be a speaker someday. I'm getting there, but
you'll get there. You will. You're very smart. You're talented. You're very outspoken. You're going to get there, and you're strong. You're strong.
And you're comfortable with the vulnerability. Like, that's a battle right there.
Yeah. It takes some time.
And, you're also cool as fuck. So, that helps too. Oh, well, Mikayla, I don't think we have any other questions unless you guys think of any that you might have lingering.
Brianne, you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I think this has been wonderful. Substance abuse is not something I am super familiar with. So I really enjoyed hearing about it. You definitely spoke about some things that I wasn't aware of, and I learned a lot today. So thank you.
Yeah, one thing I would like to repeat actually that I learned today, because we went over it kind of quickly, was that the term is not relapse anymore. What is it again, Mikayla?
Reoccurrence. Relapse is stigmatizing. Also, it's not clean anymore, because like clean versus dirty, it's soap. It's not addict, it's person with a substance use disorder. There's a whole document called Words Matter that you can look up so that you can get familiarized with the change of language. I think if anybody going into social work should definitely know, because it's rapid changing and cycling. So it hasn't been around for a long time, but they are trying to change the language as much as they can so that it's not so stigmatizing.
Yeah, Words Matter. We'll have that below in the link for anybody who wants to check that out.
I didn't know that relapsing was going non-existent because I heard a term recently that said relapsing is not a scar, it's just a bruise. And I love that.
I don't have a problem with the word relapse per se, like me as a person in recovery. But since I'll be working in the field, I have to use the term reoccurrence. But it's an individualized basis. Like most people that are in recovery hate the fact that they're changing it to reoccurrence. Like they've worked on themselves, they're fine with the relapse. But moving forward, they don't want things to sound so harsh and negative so that addiction isn't seen in such a negative light.
Something I want to just close with. So if there's anybody listening, the MHSA National Helpline, there's a phone number. So if you're in need of substance abuse treatment, this number is available to try to help. The number is 1-800-622-HELP. And the numbers for help are 4357. So 1-800-662-4357. So if anybody needs to reach out for help, you can start there. All right, guys. Well, that was a great conversation. And again, thank you for joining us, Mikayla. We appreciate your time so very much.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for being here.
All right, ladies. Signing off.
Before we depart for the day, we want to remind you that if you have topics you would like to hear about or just have general comments, feel free to reach out and submit those.
Or if you have a topic you want to discuss with us here, reach out. We are always welcoming of making new connections.
Our site is linked below, but please check out our TikTok or Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube. Talk to you later, everyone, and thanks for listening.
And remember, take care of your future.
Take care of each other.
Take care of yourself.